Assalamu alaikum. Hello and welcome to this video where I'll try to walk you guys through a folder structure that I use for my Angular apps. This is not a beginner video. This is not very beginner friendly. I do assume that you have some experience with Angular. Maybe you've built a couple of apps on Angular. And this is just a video to share a folder structure that I find to be ideal in terms of reusability, maintainability, and testability of your app, and also easy to pick up from one developer to another. So if you do abandon a project and someone wants to pick it up after you, they'll find it fairly familiar if they use the same approach, and even if they don't, things are just straightforward and they make sense, and that's why I like this approach, and I'm going to share it here with you guys. I'm going to start from scratch. This is the getting started guide on the Angular website. You will have to install Angular if you don't have it, obviously, but I do have it installed, so I'm just going to start from a new app here. So ng new, let's call it, for example, ng structure. I'm going to pause the video here. Actually, let's just get the routing done. I personally prefer SCSS, but feel free to use whichever you like these. So I'm just going to go with SCSS, and then I'm going to pause the video and wait for it to finish. So now this is done. If you inspect clear that. If you inspect the folder now, we have our ng structure folder here. Let's cd into it. ng structure. Did I type that right? Yeah, I did. All right, and then we're gonna open it in our code editor of choice. I'm using VS Code here because why not? As you can see, we get a fairly familiar getting started Angular application here, index, our app, assets, environments, and all sorts of other stuff. Here we can start our application with ng-serve. I'm sure you're familiar with all that. I just need to get this out of the way so we can get into what we're here to do, which is the folder structure. I think I'll have to pause the video again here, or nope. That ran successfully. So we go over here, localhost, it's on 4200. We have our ng structure app here running. But there's quite a bit on the starting page. This does not look like a starting page, so let's just get rid of everything here. This app component, by the way, like I said, I do assume some familiarity with Angular, so I don't have, hopefully, to explain what all of these things do. So we only leave the router outlet, our router outlet here, and now we get a clean structure. And now let's add a couple of modules to work with. The first of which being the ng generate module. Let's generate the authentication module. We do want routing on that because we'll have different pages like login, register, forgot password, and all sorts of things here in authentication. Alright, so let's work a little bit. Let's generate a component, actually, ng generate component. And we want it to be within the authentication module. Let's just say, for example, we want to call it a login component. Actually, you can just call it login. No, Angular takes care of appending this component and all that. And if you go into the component TS file, it's already called login component. All right, so here, let's just change this to an H1 here that says login page, for example. All right, and if we go into our app, and we haven't given it any routes yet, so it has no reason to go there. Let's give it some routes. In our app routing modules here, we define our main routes, right? I do have some snippets here, but again, I'm assuming you know what these things do. We want to lazily go to, for example, path called auth, right? And we go into our authentication module here, and then authentication module. Right, I'm also assuming you know what this is. This is, if you don't, this is lazily loading the authentication module. As of Angular 9, this is the accepted terminology. This is the accepted syntax to load, to lazily load modules instead of we had load children in Angular 8 and below. We had a different syntax, but from Angular 9 and above, this is the accepted syntax now. So if we go into the auth into the auth route, we will land here, and then here we kind of need to handle it as well. So I'll bring out a normal eager route here, empty one, and then we'll just, by default, we'll just call the login component. Let's just start at that. So now if we go to our application and we put /auth, this is our route that brings us to a login page. And because this is a folder structure type of thing, I'll add login because we want it /auth/login, and we can add an empty route here, like a default path match, and we just redirect to login as well. It just makes it cleaner. So now even if we go to auth, just like that, it redirects us to login. So now that we have our login page, let's generate a couple more modules. Let's call it, for example, account. We do want routing on that as well. This is our account module, and it's going to hold our homepage or homepage and whatnot. Let's generate a component on that as well, and generate a component, call it account. So let's just call it account. It's fine. We don't want to go to a different route just to load the account. All right, so now these are our paths for the login. Let's do the same thing for account. In account routing module here, we're going to generate another eager route that we're just going to use to load account component. And let's also handle, actually that's fine. That would do for now. So if we go to our app routing module and we also want to lazily load this account module. So we go to path account, all right, and then we go to our account here, account folder, then account module. There we go, account module over here. And now if we go to account, just /account, that would do. Account works. So we have two routes working at the moment. We have authentication login, and then we have an account. Now we get into the meat of this video, which is how to structure the rest of the app. So these are the routes. The routes are okay. There aren't many ways to structure routes. You may, of course, put them in a separate file, but we're not going to do that in this video. I want to talk to you about a module called the core module. All right, so let's go generate it, and do generate module core. It is a good practice to have in every Angular app to have a core module. The core module takes care of cross-cutting concerns that you have across your app. I'm talking about, for example, guards, enter setters. I'm talking about any logic that would services. You may put services in here, but you can also put them wherever in your application as long as you have the provided in route decorator. But core really takes care of everything that is needed throughout your app. Even components, for example, let's say I like to put my navbar component and sidebar component in here if I have them, because they are needed. They're needed across the app, and they're only needed once. Like, you don't have to add them to every module you create or every component you create. You just have them in the core module. One thing about the core module is it can also be imported once. You import it in your app module in here. In import, you do core module over here, and that's it. You never actually re-import this anywhere else in your application, and that's the whole point of it being a core module, or having cross-cutting concerns in there, because you don't want to. There's actually a way to enforce this, to enforce core module being imported only once, but we're not going to get into that in this video. I can make a separate video just for that, just to explain, because there are a bunch of decorators there that need explaining on their own, and this is just going to make a video long. So that's the core module. I want to talk to you about another module that every Angular app, I think, should have. That's the, I'm not sure if you guessed it by now, it's the shared module. We also then need we also didn't need routing here, because it's not something you'd call. It's not something that would contain any pages or anything. This just stores your shared components, as the name implies. Shared components, shared config files, things like that. Shared module, as you see, for example, your directives, your pipes, anything that is reusable throughout different modules of the app. The difference being, this stores things that are only used once, like the navbar. You only use the navbar once in your application. You don't import it in different modules. Here, for example, we could have a directive that makes the text red. right? And you may want to add it to different HTML elements of different modules and different components. That's why I have it in shared. For example, your UI logic, things that are reusable, again, like I said, are stored in the shared folder. So the first thing we're going to do, let's give some structure to this login page here. We don't want it to be like just an H1 login page. We're going to vastly improve it by including a button that says login, and on click on that button we call a login function. Here in our component we define the login function. I like to define them like this. They don't really Angular does a really good job in with the this keyword. You can also as well have them like that in arrow functions the same way React does, but Angular does a really good job in handling the this keyword. So here what we want to do is on click on that button, let's just, for example, for now, console log login in. All right. So if we go to our application and then we go to our auth login, we have a button now that if we click on, get our console, and then if you click on that button you see login in. Right now, so the click works. Let's just make it go somewhere, and to make it go somewhere we're going to need the Angular router. Of course we are going to import it and include it as a private dependency. I can say dependency because this is basically a DI mechanism. So router is here now. We call the router and we navigate. For now we just navigate by URL, nothing fancy here, and then you go to account. But if you use navigate by URL, you must use an absolute path as opposed to a relative path. I'm assuming, hopefully you know what that is. So auth login, and then when you click on login, it takes you to the account page. Let's add something to the account page as well. Where's our account module, account page? Let's have an H1 account home, and then maybe a paragraph with some lorem ipsum, and then maybe that's all we want to do, and we want to be able to log out. So if you click on that button here, you call a function called logout. Let's also call the button log out. Right, so now we have our account. When you click on that, nothing happens. We get a complaint actually that logout is not a function because we haven't yet written it. Go to the component, of course, just so I can demonstrate that these things work interchangeably. You don't need to use one or the other, both work. Console.log login out, but I actually want to log the user out, so we need to bring out the router again. Router from Angular router here. So this dot router dot navigate by URL again, and then again absolute path, so auth slash login. If you have trouble coming up with the knowing what the absolute path is, all you do is you start from the app routing module and you see what you call first. We call auth as a path. You call auth first, and then you load this basically. Sorry, not that. You load this, which goes directly into login. So it's slash auth slash login as opposed to slash login alone or slash auth alone. So yeah, that should log you out if you went to test that. If you click on that login out, and as you can see, you're brought back to the login page. And here we're going to introduce something called an auth guard. Right now, if you're in the login page and you want to access the account page, you can just do account and it goes to account, and vice versa. You can do auth login as long as you know the route, the root, I should really say. Comes here in the login page. Here we introduce the concept of guards. Not sure if you're familiar with those, but that's fine for now. Let's create a folder. Like I said, here this core module here holds everything that is instantiated once in our application. We don't have to redefine it every time. So guards as a folder, let's call it auth.guard. guard.ts, and I also have a snippet for that. So auth guard, actually guards, let's change the name. Guards have a couple of methods. There's can activate, can load, a bunch of other things. And I actually have this very annoying warning here. Experimental support for decorators. I do have the experimental decorators option in my TS config, but I don't know why this happens all the time. So the solution I found for this is to just close VS Code and open VS Code again. Super annoying. If any of you know how can I get rid of that, I'll be appreciated. So yeah, for now we're going to implement can activate, and this time for now we're just always going to allow access to the route. Let's just keep it as true. So and we actually, for this to work, we have to add it to one of our routes. Let's go to our app routing module here, and we just do can activate, and here it takes an array of guards. We just do auth guard, and it takes care of it. Now the auth guard is not actually provided anywhere. Sorry, I shouldn't really have that in the root. Because we want to provide it to our in our core module, and then import our core module in the app module here. We have already done that. Otherwise, there's no point. If you provide this in the root folder, there's no point really of having this whole structure anyway, because everything is provided in the root. So what we're going to do is actually import. Sorry, not actually import. We want to provide. We want to add this guard as a provider in the providers array here, auth guard. So we have this provided for us in the core module. Let's just save that. It's annoying. So we have this provided for us in the core module, and we already have our core module imported in our app module. So this now should work. Let's just launch this because yeah, we didn't. So we have our guard. Guard always allows access at the moment. Always allows access to our routes. So yeah, let's check. If we go to login, that works. You go to account, that also works. You go back to login. So it's like we've done nothing at the moment, but this does not actually hold a value, a hard-coded value like this, true or false. Here you would actually want to check if your user is authenticated, because this is an auth guard. We can have all sorts of different guards, but since this is an auth guard, we want to allow access to the route if the user is authenticated or not. And for that reason, you would have, for example, you would have your authentication service, and you'd make an HTTP call, and you'd try to log the user in against the server, and then if that is logged in, you get back I don't know how you handle your authentication, OAuth cookie or GWT token or whichever, and then you check if that is valid, then you return true. If not, you return false. Basically, you don't allow access. What happens? Let's just check what happens if you put false in here. And keep in mind, we provided this guy. We check against it in here. So every time we want to access this account path, every time we want to access this activates, and we basically execute this logic right here. Let's just give it a try. So now we're on the login page, and we have our guard set to false. So we should never actually be able to go into the app component no matter what we do. Even if you do it here, it should come back. So it basically just doesn't let you go. It doesn't let you get in. That's the whole point of guards, and that's the whole point of checking whether the user is authenticated or not. Let's actually add that. Let's have our services here. I'll just have services here, but I'll actually provide them in the root module. Right. So never mind this. You can have them anywhere you want. As long as you have the provided in root, which is the recommended approach at the moment. Let's have alt service.ts. We're not going to have any communication with any HTTP server or anything. We're just going to hold some local values, and we check against those. I have a snippet for service as well, because, well, it just makes everything easy. Service, right, for right now, like I said, we have provided in root, and if you don't want this, you basically scrap that, and then you provide them in the core module, and you import that, and that should work. I like to call this HTTP, and because we have HTTP client here, we also need to, in our app module, we also need to bring up in our imports, very important, HTTP client module. because that's how we're going to provide it, basically. Why is this complaining? I don't know, because we didn't save it, maybe. Yeah, so here let's just hold a value, a Boolean value called user logged in, right? And it's a Boolean, or actually, you don't. If you use TypeScript, you don't have to do this. This is a redundant statement, because if you put user logged in equals false, this infers the type. See, user logged in Boolean. TypeScript automatically infers the type if you just have it like that. I've seen a lot of occurrences where you can have, for example, number, and then you put here equals 2. That is redundant. If you have an initial value, it automatically infers the type. So that's on that. We need two methods here. We need is user logged in. Basically, is that logged in? Yeah, is user logged in. Basically, what this does is it just returns user logged in. So it's going to return true or false, whether or not the user is logged in or not. And we need something to call. We need actually three methods, not two. Log user in. Here, just this dot user logged in. We set it to true, and user log user out. We call this at our logout method. This dot user logged in false. All right. So the idea here is, like I said, you'd make a call to your backend, and then you return a token or a cookie or whatever you use to manage authentication. But for now, on login, we just call this. We set this local value here to true. Otherwise, once we log out, we just set it back to false. So we go now to our we go to login component. We need to inject the auth service here. Auth service. I like TypeScript. I'm a big advocate of using TypeScript. It just keeps everything neat and tidy. And I get excellent IntelliSense support or code completion support, whatever. Here, this .auth service .log user in. Here we just change that local value in the service, because the service is a singleton. So if you change that value here, you can access it. You can access the updated value in any other component. The same idea applies once you log the user out in the account component, except this time we're going to call log user out, and obviously it doesn't know the auth service yet, so we need to provide it, to inject it, auth service. The thing with Angular is it's full of terminology, dependents, methods, classes, providers, decorators, components, imports, exports, declarations, pipes. It's a lot to wrap your head around, especially if you're a beginner. I can understand that. So yeah, there's that. Now in our guard, we actually want to check that value, auth service over here, and then we actually want to return this auth service is user logged in. Right. So that method here will return if the user is logged in, will return yes, or true. Sorry, if the user is not logged in, will stay as false. So let's demonstrate this now. Let's go to auth login. Oh, sorry, what is it? HTTP client. But we have provided that. Have we not saved it? App module. So what exactly is the issue here? You have this. Okay, I'll pause this video to look for the issue. Sorry, I don't know what happened there. I just saved a couple of things, resaved a couple of files here, and it worked. So I didn't actually change anything. So now let's test it. Let's test our guard. If we go to auth login, now it shouldn't actually let us go to account. Once we go to account, it should just not let us go there, because the initial value user logged in is actually false. We can only go there once you do log in, and that will set this value to true once you go to login component. Sorry, just to show you again, this will log the user in, which means it will set it to true, and then it will let you execute this Let's try it. Log in. Now we can access the home. But what happens if you do not set this in, right? You never actually log the user in, and hence you never actually call this method, and therefore this user logged in will remain false forever. Let's see what happens if you click login. You see the console log here, but you never actually go in because you're not allowed to. The guard is stopping you there. So that's our guard. I think this video is getting quite long as it is. I still want to talk about a bunch of things. I still want to have some HTTP calls to JSON placeholder. I still want to have some configuration files added. I still want to play with the environments here and some constants and all that. So I think I'll pause the video. I'll stop the video here, and then I'll make another one to talk about all of the other things. So, Assalamu alaikum. Peace out.